Hello and welcome again to my channel Adventures of Midlife. You can go to my website adventuresofmidlife.com. In this video, I'm going to talk about the desert safari that I took during my short trip to Qatar. You can also view my video on the main parts of the trip itself in this channel. I had booked a 4-hour desert safari trip on the last day of my short trip to Qatar in mid-October. The trip included a camel ride, dune bashing, sandboarding, a visit to the famous inland sea, and watching a sunset. A desert safari is considered a must when visiting the Middle East or countries with a desert. So, this is not my first desert experience. My first one was in Dubai a few years ago. And then during this current 3-country trip, I did a desert safari including a night stay in a desert camp when I was in Oman. We left Doha around 2:30 p.m. and drove through the streets of the capital and then entered the countryside. As it is everywhere, or almost everywhere, the countryside of Qatar looks quite different from the capital Doha. Gone were the sky rises and it was mostly flat land interspersed with mostly single-floor houses. And then we made our first stop, about halfway between Doha and the inland sea. The stop was for the camel ride. There were a dozen or so camels seated on the sand and bellowing through their nose caps, seemingly impatient. Heights coupled with unsteady movements atop any slow or fast-moving animal makes me somewhat anxious, so I decided to skip this ride. I let the others mount the animals and sit atop the Mahavis and then go on that short ride accompanied by the camel pullers. Meanwhile, I enjoyed a good cup of Qatari tea, the Karak tea. Once the camel rides were done and the wheels of our 4x4 got deflated, we got onto them and raced towards the desert. The dune bashing. This certainly can be considered as the highlight of the tour. Landscape-wise, deserts look like, well, deserted places, devoid of any beauty. But it is far from the truth. There is much life in the deserts, though they are of different variety that have adapted to the dry, shadeless conditions. But the landscape without luxurious greenery itself is a beauty. Deserts can be flat or full of dunes of sand piled up by the wind. They form a rich landscape with many hills and a range of colors from light yellow to golden to almost dark orange, depending also on the time of the day. From the distance, one can also notice tracts of 4x4s crisscrossing. And at a closer look, one can feel the loose sand getting into the clothes, shoes, and, if one is not careful enough, even the eyes. A desert safari means driving on the dunes and on the flatlands. However, it is not as easy as it sounds. When I went on the dune bashing trip in Oman, our guide/driver Khair rode up closer to a dune but hesitated at its foot. It might be too dangerous, Khair told me, and then explained that if the incline is too steep and he does not handle the angle of attack correctly, then there was every chance the truck will hit the mount head-on instead of driving up. Our driver/guide Naufan was from the Indian state of Kerala and told us he has been doing this run for so many years, sometimes twice a day. He was very casual with his driving, but he knew these tracks very well and his vehicle. He knew the driving angle and the speed that he needs to gain the correct momentum so that he can race to the stop without getting stuck, and then slow down so that the 4x4 will not tumble down. All the while, he also had to ensure that the passengers inside had enough adrenaline pumping fun while not too scared. Sometimes he would just race up in such a speed that the vehicle would partially be enveloped by the stirred up sand. And then there were moments when he scaled the mount at such close quarters to one edge that those like me seated on that side had those almost eye-closing moments, for fear that a few inches more on that side and the vehicle would tumble down on its side along the precipice. But all was well. Sandboarding. After the dune bash, we made our second stop, this time for some sandboarding. Sandboarding is fundamentally a version of snowboarding, skating, or surfing. The difference is that sandboarding is done on dunes. Well, there are claims that the ancient Egyptians utilized sandboarding to ferry goods, but others claim this started only sometime during the past century. The point where we stood was atop a dune, and there was a steep inclining ending on a short flat landing surface. Again, my intention was to pass on this adventure as well. Speeding through an inclination makes me anxious. Here, the landing was short, but my worry was actually what was beyond that short flat surface. There was another what appeared to be a steep incline and then water. Naufan told me the water was just a couple of feet deep, but I still wasn't ready to do sandboarding on my feet. So I took the easiest way out, sitting on the board and sliding. And that was fun too, even though the cautious side of me took over by putting out my legs well in advance to brake. And then climbing back to the top of the mount was an exercise that had many panting. Once we had enough fun sandboarding, we continued our trip with more dune bashing before heading to the inland sea. The inland sea, or Khor al-Adad, is a wonder of the nature. An inland sea is typically a large body of water which is either landlocked or connected to a sea via a narrow stretch of water with varying degrees of salinity. And in Khor al-Adad's case, its salinity is reportedly higher than the Persian Gulf with which it is connected. What is so amazing about this inland sea is that it is hugged by desert and dunes, something unseen anywhere else. And this UNESCO recognized nature reserve has its own biodiversity ranging from different fish species to Arabian oryx and gazelles. And for this reason, this is a popular tourist spot, particularly during the winter months, which just started. And this inland sea can be accessed only by a 4x4. Compared to the previous stages of this tour, which was the camel riding, dune bashing and sandboarding, this stage was a tame affair with just walking around and dipping your feet in the water. From where we stood by the water, we could see Saudi Arabia across the water on the other side. In the distance, the sun was setting, and it was time for some photo shooting. The sun soon became crimson red before disappearing behind the horizon. And then it was time to return to the hotel. Well, that's it for this time, my friends, for the video on Desert Safari in Qatar. I hope you enjoyed the video and please do subscribe or post comments. You can also visit my website at adventuresofmidlife.com for more posts. Thank you. Ciao.